Lecture 4. Hindu Gods and Devotional Practices.
What do you make of a pantheon that features an elephant-headed god, a charming flute-playing young male deity, a fierce-looking female goddess wearing a necklace of skulls with blood dripping from her mouth, and a meditating yogi with long hair, a trident, and a serpent? To the non-Hindu, the Hindu gods can appear quite strange and overwhelming. First, there are so many of them. And second, they can appear in manifestations that range from childlike to loving to bloodthirsty. At times, contradictory elements will be embodied in a single deity. It's worth spending time talking about the Hindu gods for at least two reasons. First, we must understand the deities in order to understand what Hindus believe and how they worship. Second, it's just incredibly fascinating and a lot of fun. Whatever you believe, the stories of the gods and the forms they take dazzle the imagination. In fact, reflecting on divinity through the lens of Hindu gods can lead even the non-Hindu to new insights about the nature of divinity. The first thing that people notice about the Hindu gods is how many of them there are. It is sometimes said that in Hinduism there are 330 million gods. Indian language has a tendency toward hyperbole, so this is a way of saying that, yes, there are a lot of gods. But don't worry. If you learn about 10 or so, you'll recognize most of the deities you come across in temples and home shrines. It's clear that Hindus don't shy away from representing gods. And this is an obvious difference between Hinduism and, say, Judaism and Islam, which prohibit making any images of God. Hindu temples and homes almost always feature paintings and statues of gods. Given that in both Hinduism and Islam, the two largest religions of India, people are tremendously devoted to God and have feelings of reverence and awe, why are there such radically different opinions about representing God? Well, here's one way to think about it. If God is infinite, beyond anything we can fully know or imagine, how can we relate to God? On one side, there's the response of Judaism and Islam. Given that God is infinite, don't even try to represent God. Because if you do, you'll end up worshiping the representation, becoming idolaters, and in the process, circumscribing and limiting God, who is, in fact, limitless. It's better to leave God formless and worship God through the Word in an interior way, rather than through the senses. Hinduism approaches this question differently. Since divine reality is infinite, never stop representing it. Never think you've got it all in one image. So the answer is not the avoidance of representation, but endless multiplicity. From a Hindu perspective, people need to direct their senses somewhere, have a focal point for their worship. And images help with this. For Hindus, images are not the actual deity, but rather a place for the presence of the deity to be felt, a location for the deity to reside. So Hindus are not actually worshiping the icon itself. In fact, after many festivals, the statue is disposed of, in some cases thrown in a river and replaced with a new one the following year. But the images do matter. Otherwise, why have them at all? One reason is that in Hinduism, there's an emphasis placed on the visual. Hindus believe that it's important to see and be seen by the deity. This is known as darshan, the experience of visual connection between the worshiper and the deity. When you walk into a Hindu temple, you often encounter brilliant color and ornately decorated gods. Your eye, and following that, your mind and heart, are drawn toward the divine. Most Jews, Christians, and Muslims think of God as a separate being. While this understanding is also found in some forms of Hinduism, there's another approach that we encounter in the Upanishads. In the previous lecture, we learned about the Atman, or soul, our true self. Now there's another important term we must learn, Brahman. This is the word that Hindus use to refer to ultimate reality. While some might translate that word as God, this can be misleading, as Brahman is not used in a way that would evoke images of a being like the biblical God. Brahman is often described using three Sanskrit words: Sat, Chit, Ananda. Sat means being. So Brahman is not just seen as a being, but rather as being itself. It's the ground of all that exists. Chit means consciousness. So Brahman is seen as pure, eternal consciousness. And Ananda means bliss. So Brahman is Satchidananda, being, consciousness, bliss. So now we know that we each have a soul, Atman, and we know about ultimate reality, Brahman. The Chandogya Upanishad goes on to reveal something very important about our soul in its relationship to ultimate reality. In one of the most famous passages in all of Hindu thought, the text states, "That art thou, tat tvam asi." What it ultimately says is that your soul, your Atman, is identical with ultimate reality, Brahman. So what is our relationship to the divine? We are divine. In Abrahamic religions, it can be blasphemous to say, "I am God." But in this form of Hinduism, it is the highest teaching to say, "I am the same as the Absolute," as long as we remember that the I in that statement is not the ego, it's not the separate individual personality, but rather the Atman, which is pure consciousness. When we recognize our identity with ultimate reality, we achieve liberation. So there's oneness underlying all multiplicity. And we need to see all other beings as manifestations of the divine. When you greet someone in India, it's customary to put your hands together and say, Namaste. This has been interpreted by some Hindus to mean something like, the divine in me bows to the divine in you. So in what ways are Hindus affiliated with particular gods? How many do they actually worship? Many Hindus focus their worship on one deity. So a particular person or family or even village might be focused on Krishna and others on Durga or Shiva. You can often tell what god a Hindu worships by a special marking on the forehead known as a tilak. A tilak is usually made with a substance like sandalwood paste or kumkum powder or clay or even ashes. The tilak, which usually has religious significance, can be distinguished from a bindi, the dot that's usually worn by women on the forehead, and which can be formed by a sticker or a jewel as well as by paste. The bindi is often worn for decorative purposes or to signify marriage, but sometimes those terms are used interchangeably. In most cases, while Hindus will see the god they worship as supreme, they do not see other gods as false. For many Hindus, all of the gods are seen as manifestations of the one Brahman. This is why Hinduism can be seen as polytheistic from one angle, but monistic, emphasizing the oneness of all being, from another. Hindu texts teach that people fail to see the unity. They get caught up in an illusion of separateness. The everyday world is described as Maya, illusion, the play of forms behind which is the reality of oneness. Some Hindus worship many deities, for they see different deities performing different functions, representing different characteristics of God. They might go to Ganesha when they're about to embark on a trip, Lakshmi if they seek good fortune and success in business, and Shiva when they face death. As one Hindu devotee said, they seem like different gods, but they're all just characteristics of a single God, the one Brahman. As we can see, there are strong tendencies toward pluralism in Hinduism. The belief that people who worship in different ways are not wrong, but rather are connected with another manifestation of the divine, perhaps different than mine, but no less real or legitimate. And now, we'll meet the deities themselves. The best way to approach the deities is to talk about three categories. representing the gods who are worshipped most widely in India and whose images you're most likely to see in temples and homes. Vishnu and his avatars, especially Krishna and Rama, Shiva in his many forms, and Devi, the goddess, in her many forms. We'll begin with Vishnu. Vishnu is seen as the all-pervading Lord of the universe and protector of humanity. Many Vishnu worshippers wear a tilak on their foreheads that consists of two vertical lines joined at the bottom to make a U or a V shape. If you see something that looks like a V, it's easy to just remember Vishnu, but the English letter has nothing to do with that shape. It's said that the shape represents the footprint of Vishnu. Vishnu is usually portrayed with blue skin, which is said to represent vastness, like the vast ocean or endless sky or space. He has 4 arms, which indicates power, and he's sometimes portrayed lying on the coils of a great cosmic serpent, floating on an ocean with a lotus growing out of his navel. Vishnu's 4 arms hold a conch shell, a discus, a mace, and a lotus flower. The conch is said to represent Vishnu's creative power and is associated with the divine sound of the cosmos. It's actually often blown in religious rituals. And the lotus flower represents purity and liberation. His associated animal is the eagle Garuda, on whose back Vishnu is often portrayed. Many Hindu deities are depicted in male-female pairs, and this represents the coming together of the male and female powers of the universe. The female power is called Shakti, and it's necessary in order to activate the spiritual power that resides in the male. The goddesses depicted with the male gods are often called consorts, although their relationships differ. In some cases, the couple's married, for instance. And Vishnu's consort is Lakshmi, the goddess of wealth. One of the most important features of Vishnu is that he manifests himself in avatars in order to help humanity when we are in need. And there are 10 great avatars associated with Vishnu. 2 are most important and are widely worshipped throughout India: Krishna and Rama. While worshippers of Krishna and Rama are in this Vishnu tradition, in many cases the devotional focus is entirely on Krishna or Rama rather than on the god Vishnu. Krishna is one of the most popular gods. He's been called the best loved of all Hindu gods. He takes many forms, and in virtually all of them he's depicted with dark blue skin and long black hair. He's sometimes depicted as a small child crawling on the floor, enjoying his favorite treat, butter. In fact, the mischievous young Krishna is sometimes known as the butter thief. But as he grows, he becomes known as a protector of his people, in one case slaying a serpent who threatened them. One of the most common portrayals of Krishna shows him as a cowherd called Krishna Gopala, a handsome young man playing the flute and often charming and flirting with the young girls around him. The love and longing that these gopis, his milkmaids, feel for him represents the love that Krishna's devotees feel for him. Amongst these gopis is one, Radha, who becomes his most important lover and consort. And many beautiful paintings portray Krishna and Radha together. The theme of divine play, called Krishna's Leelas, is often portrayed in poetry and art, and there's a sensual, sometimes erotic element to these portrayals. These forms of Krishna show the god's delight, his willingness to playfully subvert convention, and his loving interaction with his devotees. The young Krishna shows the divine as approachable, allowing people to intimately connect with their deity without the formalities and seriousness that so often characterize worship. If Krishna is the divine in the form of child or lover, Vishnu's avatar of Rama is an exemplar of the courageous warrior honoring his dharma, doing his sacred duty no matter the consequences. Rama is the hero of the epic Ramayana. In this epic, Rama, who's seen as the ideal ruler, is forced to go into exile in the forest. He's accompanied by his wife Sita, who becomes the paradigm of the loyal, devoted, and ultimately long-suffering woman, and also by his brother Lakshmana. In the epic, Sita is kidnapped by the demon Ravana, who takes her to the island of Lanka, that's present-day Sri Lanka. Now, this action-packed epic features a dramatic rescue mission, as Rama, accompanied by an army of monkeys featuring the loyal and heroic Hanuman, wages a battle against Ravana and his forces, ultimately defeating him and rescuing Sita. Because of Hanuman's role in that story, he becomes a popular deity within Hinduism as well. Deities in Hinduism are often portrayed in associated groups, and a very common representation is of Rama, Sita, Rama's brother Lakshmana, and Hanuman all together. There are a number of Hindu festivals associated with Rama. Some celebrate Rama's birth and his marriage to Sita, but the two most popular celebrations are of his victory over Ravana, in which the battle's acted out with music and dance and costumes, and the festival of Diwali, which is a festival of lights. This involves a celebration of Rama's return from exile and his coronation. Shiva is a god who embodies opposites. Like Krishna, he's represented in many ways, but in Shiva's case, these take forms that seem contradictory. Shiva is a great yogi, a meditator. Shiva is an ascetic, depicted with long dreadlocks and a loincloth. And at the same time, he's a family man, with a wife and 2 sons. Well, one of his sons has an elephant head, so it's not your typical family. He also has a terrifying form, one associated with death and dissolution. I'll do my best to give a sense of his different representations, many of which you see if you visit a Hindu temple or travel in South Asia. Let's begin with Shiva as the Lord of Yoga. He's often shown seated in a meditative posture on tiger skin, meditating up in the Himalayas. He's covered in ash, carrying a trident, and is garlanded by a snake. He possesses a third eye and matted hair, which is fused with the rushing Ganges. Every element of Shiva in his various depictions carries symbolic meaning. His trident is a weapon against evil and ignorance. Shiva's third eye, if turned inward, gains wisdom and insight. And if turned outward, it can be the eye of destruction, destroying greed, ego, and lust. This version of Shiva as Lord of Yoga features prominently in the religious lives of ascetics and meditators and holy people. Devotees of Shiva wear a distinctive tilak, composed of 3 horizontal lines. Some Shiva-worshipping sadhus, or holy people, undergo remarkable austerities to discipline their minds and bodies. In the most extreme cases, this can involve meditating in extreme or tense heat, or standing on one leg for up to years at a time. This isn't common, but those who are able to accomplish such austerities are said to possess great powers and are held in high regard. Shiva is associated with death and dissolution, and he frequents cremation grounds. He's associated with the city of Varanasi, or Benares, the most sacred city to Hindus in all of India. The Ganges River, itself considered a goddess, Mother Ganga, flows through Varanasi and is the aspiration of many devout Hindus to have their ashes scattered in the Ganges. In fact, many Hindus come to Varanasi to die, as death in this sacred city and the scattering of ashes into the Ganges assures one of liberation. Another common depiction of Shiva shows him with his family, his wife Parvati and his 2 sons. One of these sons is Ganesha, the elephant-headed deity who's very popular throughout India. Ganesha is known as the remover of obstacles and the guardian of entryways, and praying to him is said to bring good luck and success, so many people worship him before embarking on a trip or a new venture. Also present with Shiva in many of his portrayals is his animal, Nandi the bull, who stands at the entrance of many Shiva temples. One of the best known, visually compelling images of Shiva is as Shiva Nataraja, the Lord of the Dance. He dances in a circle of flames, 1 foot on the ground and 1 off, showing that he's both within and transcending the world. In one hand, Shiva holds a 2-sided drum that beats the rhythm of creation and destruction. Shiva's dance can be seen as the divine activity that brings the cosmos into and out of existence, driving the continuous cycles of time. The final representation of Shiva that we'll discuss is the lingam, which is ubiquitous throughout India. A lingam is an object shaped like a pillar that represents Shiva's power. To many scholars, the lingam is a phallic symbol that signifies the male principle and its potency. Many linga are set inside a yoni, a representation of female power, which is shaped like a vulva. This union of Shiva and the female Shakti energy shows the way that the two energies are needed to sustain the universe. You'll frequently find a Shiva lingam in temples where it will be garlanded with flowers and receive offerings of substances like water and sandalwood paste. In Hinduism, there's a sense that this female divine power, Shakti, is the active force of the cosmos, and without it, the male deities would be powerless. The goddess can take many forms in Hinduism, from gentle and loving, to playful and passionate, to fierce and terrifying. We've already seen a number of female deities that are associated with the Hindu male gods. There was Parvati, Shiva's wife, Sita, the loyal wife of Rama, Radha, the passionate lover of Krishna, and Lakshmi, goddess of wealth and prosperity, who's the consort of Vishnu. Lakshmi is identifiable as the goddess from whose hand flows a stream of coins. Another important goddess is Sarasvati, who's associated with learning and music. She's depicted with a book that represents the Vedas and a veena, a stringed instrument. Two of the most important goddesses are known for their fierceness and intensity. One of these is Durga, who's portrayed with numerous arms, many of them holding weapons, riding a lion, ready for battle. In one well-known image, she slays a demon by placing a foot on his neck and decapitating him, perhaps representing the triumph over evil and ignorance. The Durga Puja is a popular, elaborate Bengali festival in which many family members return to their ancestral homes to celebrate. At the end of the festival, these huge images of Durga are immersed in the river. Kali is an instantly recognizable goddess, usually portrayed as dark. She's called the Black One, with a long red tongue and blood dripping from her mouth and a necklace of skulls around her. Like Shiva, she's associated with cremation grounds, and she's sometimes shown lying over Shiva's prostrate body. Because of her fierceness, she's considered a great protector. It's difficult for many Westerners to understand the appeal of the terrifying deities in Hinduism. But we must keep in mind that if God is behind all phenomena, then we have to see even the fearful aspects of existence, earthquakes, hurricanes, death, as parts of divine creation. Hindus do not flee from these realities in their religion, but rather, through these gods, face them directly. There are many ways to worship the deities. Some of the most simple involve repetitively chanting the name of the deity, or chanting a short mantra, a sacred verbal formula associated with the deity. This is often accompanied by the movement of mala beads, like a South Asian rosary. Saying the name of the deity is itself an efficacious act. And when Hindus become devotees of a deity, they often take new names that consist of the names of the Hindu deities or of the qualities that they seek in their relationship with the gods. We've talked about the importance of the visual dimension of Hindu worship, but sound can also play an important role, as we can see from the importance of chanting within the tradition. And one sound is more important than all others: the sacred Sanskrit syllable Om, which represents the primordial sound of the cosmos, the root mantra that brings all other mantras into being. Many Hindu chants begin with the chanting of Om, and there's an entire yoga practice that centers on Om. The rituals that take place in Hindu temples and homes are called pujas. And a large part of these rituals can be seen as a hospitality ritual, in which the devotee acts as a host to welcome the deity, who's the guest. The person will invoke the deity, reciting mantras, offer the deity water for bathing, fresh clothing, and food. The devotee will anoint the deity with oils and sandalwood paste, and make offerings of flowers, incense, and light through a lamp, which will be moved around the deity in a ritual known as arati. At home, the ritual would be performed by an adult, often the eldest woman in the house. At the temple, by a Brahmin priest. In the temple, the food that's blessed by the deity, called prasad, is returned to the devotee to be consumed, so that one takes in the blessing of the god. The priest will also take the arati lamp to devotees who cup their hands over the flames and then move their hands over their heads and faces to bring the light of the deity to themselves. If you visit a Hindu temple, you'll probably be welcome to participate in these experiences. In the main prayer room, which houses the images of the deities, you'll be expected to remove your shoes. As there are usually no pews or seats, you'll either stand or sit on the floor to observe the rituals. The Hindu puja is a full sensory experience. It features the visual display of the deity's forms, the sound of chanting, drums, and the harmonium. It's an instrument like an accordion, which often accompanies Hindu chanting. The smell of incense in the air, the taste of the prasad, the blessed food. The worshipper can receive the tilak, a mark on the forehead that represents the blessing they've received at the puja. Since I mentioned food, it's important to keep in mind that many, though not all, Hindus are vegetarian. India is a center for vegetarianism in the world, and I saw numerous vegetarian restaurants in every city I visited there. This is in part an illustration of the Hindu concept of ahimsa, or non-violence. And the belief in rebirth means that we can be reborn as animals and they as humans. Furthermore, almost all Hindus refuse to eat beef, as the cow is considered worthy of reverence and its killing is forbidden, not just religiously, but legally in most of India. The cow is considered to be a giving, nurturing being from whose body milk, yogurt, and butter come. When you bring food to a Hindu family, make it vegetarian, just to be safe. In addition to the worship at temples and homes, there are frequent festivals in India in which large numbers of people come together to worship. These festivals can be associated with the birth of a deity or an important event in the life of a deity, such as marriage or a victory in battle. Some festivals occur in one particular village or area, but others are found throughout India, such as Diwali and Holi. Diwali is the festival of lights, and its celebration features lamps, lanterns, and fireworks, as well as sweets and gifts and new clothes. It's an autumn festival associated with the harvest. This is particularly important in an agrarian society. It's the time when accounts are closed and the new fiscal year begins. And since it's a time for putting one's finances in order, some Hindus perform special pujas for Lakshmi, the goddess of wealth. Diwali commemorates the homecoming of the god Rama after his exile, and there are rows of lamps that welcome him home, where he's crowned as rightful king. The festival of Holi is quite literally an explosion of color. This is a spring festival with connections to the color and fertility of the season, and also to the stories of the gods and the themes of love, sex, and play. One of the most notable parts of the festival occurs when people throw colored powder and water at each other. In many cultures, there's a festival that occurs each year in which the normal order is inverted, which allows for a temporary release of energy, like a controlled blowing off steam before the order is reestablished. Holi can be seen through this lens, for during the holiday, people do what they normally do not do. Men sing provocative songs, women will strike men with sticks, and members of lower castes tease and throw things at people in higher castes. One event marked by this day is the burning of the demoness Holika, from whom the holiday gets its name. It's said that a loyal follower of Vishnu was going to be consigned to a fire, but Vishnu protected his devotee and made Holika burn instead. Holi celebrates the destruction of this demoness, and bonfires are lit at night to commemorate the event. Other Holi stories involve Krishna playing pranks on the gopis who loved him. And it's also said that during this holiday, color was applied to his consort Radha's face to make her darker so that she'd resemble her lover, Krishna. This is one way to account for the throwing of colors. India also features many major pilgrimages, including the largest gathering of human beings on earth, the Kumbh Mela. This pilgrimage occurs at 3-year intervals, alternating among 4 different locations. It means that it occurs once every 12 years at a given location. All the locations are along sacred rivers, such as the Ganges. Holy men and women, sadhus, along with millions of householders, come from across India to bathe in the sacred waters and perform rituals. The pilgrimage can go on for over a month, and some have attracted over 60 million people. The path of devotion to the gods is vitally important to many Hindus. At the same time, there are other paths to liberation, from meditative introspection to selfless action to transformative knowledge. In the next lecture, we'll look at the various yogas, the Hindu paths to liberation, and we'll also see the forms that Hinduism has taken in the West.